All right. So whether you're setting up a brand new customer success team, considering a customer success team for the future, revamping an existing team, expanding an existing team, no matter where you're coming to it from, there is one single core principle that's incredibly important to a customer success team functioning and functioning sustainably long term. And that is very simple. My one slide, keep it simple. And that's it. That's the presentation. Just keep it simple, and that's all there is to it. And now I'm going to go into a little bit why this is so important. And honestly, when I sat down to create this presentation, I actually started with 4 different bullet points, each different kind of ways to approach the team and kind of organize it in a way that makes the most sense. And as I was working on that, just streamlining it, making it a little bit more, straightforward, it came to me that all of them could be summarized as this single core rule. So if you're hiring for a team, if you're designing a team, looking at new processes or platforms, keep it simple, right? Now, this seems crazy. So, isn't customer success complicated? And of course it is. And that's customer success is one of the most complicated industries out there, especially for SaaS, the software as a service companies out there who are really focused in tech. If you have a customer success team, the chances are they have an enormous volume of calls, a lot of meetings and individual things going on, a ton of follow up, and the expertise that customer success managers are required to have is massive. So they are kind of the beating heart of your entire organization, right? So they interact with support, with sales, with product, with professional services. Excuse me, I forgot that name. They have to know every single product. They have to be able to sell every single product. They have to be able to support every single product. And they have to package all of this into this upper level strategic view so their conversations aren't just kind of a helpline, right? So they have to put this in a perspective, all of the different pieces together so that people continue to come to them as customer success managers as that key point of contact and as kind of the face of the company for their customers. And all of that, the enormous complexity of customer success, is actually exactly why you want to keep your processes simple. And we want to make sure that every single level of approval, every single note-taking tool, every single platform that you're using is as simple as possible. You want to make sure people know what it is, where it is, what it's for, when it's for, how to use it, and make sure that everything flows. Like the Dune principle, the spice must flow. If somebody is using the things the way they're supposed to, you should expect a prompt turnaround time with accurate information, an effective workflow, right? So that simplicity is huge, not only in making sure that things are easy to follow up in the moment when you're going through a large volume of work, but also to make them easy to troubleshoot and easy for people to step in and fill in. This makes your onboarding easier. This makes your long term training easier. This helps with burnout. If people have fewer obstacles to trip over throughout the day, that helps reduce long term stress in your team dramatically. This is huge. So we're looking at CSMs manage large high dollar portfolios of customers, multiple suites of tools, multiple teams to coordinate with, and they need to understand every product process and detail about the customer. And that's the part I missed at the end there. Not only do they have to have basically the same functional knowledge as every other team in the company, they also need to know their customers inside and out, have to do that extra research on the customer, have to schedule the calls, know who they're talking to about what, why, have the record of that conversation. Like the volume of different pieces that customer success managers have to put together, even if we were to look at it at the most possible surface level, the most basic out there, is massive. It's huge. So that's another reason why each individual part should be as simple as possible. Now, at its best, I just kind of touched on this. Customer success is the heart of your company. Sales, marketing, support, retention, renewal, training, product. It's everything with a unique perspective on the customer and business relationship. And I really wanted to harp on this point right now too, because it's always fun spending time on LinkedIn in the customer success space and watching the trends that go around. For a long time, there's been a trend of people very publicly with the little applause emojis talking about how customer success is not customer support, which sure, you want a line for people who've forgotten their password and can't log in, or things like that. You're sort of like very quick turnaround, not relationship dependent things. You need an active support line that can respond live and take care of that stuff. That's not what customer success is. The latest trend is to talk about customer success as an extension of sales, as a purely revenue generating team, which gets a lot of attention because people love having an extra sales team that generates extra revenue. And customer success is a massive, massive revenue generating department done well, but that should never be its focus. And I will die on that hill, as they say, because done well, customer success will generate a lot of revenue. Driving your entire customer success team to focus on revenue first will give you bad customer success because you have a sales team for a reason, you have a support team for a reason. Customer success is the detailed, in-depth team that bridges the gap, the strategic partner, the person who's not there every day to sell you stuff, the person whose call you answer when they call you, the person who picks up the phone when you call them. Customer success is really built on trust. And that trust, as it turns out, leads to retention, leads to upsells, leads to revenue increase. So customer success is excellent at revenue generation, and it's important to highlight that. But there is no point where we should be saying customer success is purely for revenue generation. Frankly, not a that is not an effective strategy. I was going to say something meaner. We'll just leave it there. So just looking at kind of this handshake process where customer success comes in. On the customer success side, you've got this whole product team. Product, sales, leadership comes to this situation with this is what we designed the product to do and how to use it. That training portion, that goal portion, that overall strategic view. And then married to that is this is how we use the product and what we want it to do on the customer side. And these two have a constant flow back and forth, where your leadership team is building out new features and new products, where your customers are using it in different ways and being creative with it. And that flow back and forth is really what makes this stuff work so well. And that barrier between the two becomes the most fluid and gives the best possible communication either way when you have an active, involved customer success team. So that's really important here. Quick pause. And that really is the goal. You want to make sure that the company is able to clearly communicate what the product is designed to do and how. And then you also want to make sure that customers have a free flow of feedback where they feel they're being heard, their feature requests are being acted on, that they are valued as customers and as users of this platform. That's huge. That's that trust piece that doesn't necessarily generate revenue, but does improve the product overall, improve that level of communication, improve how you're able to design it, build it, and approach customers with it. And that leads to upsells and retention and a company growth. Hugely important to focus on that. And I want to talk about just some general challenges that come up when you're setting up or running a team. You've got too many platforms. And this has been a funny one recently. If you are in customer success in 2025, your inbox, your DMs on LinkedIn are probably blowing up with people trying to sell you basically everything under the sun. AI generated call centers. You want a sales portfolio. You want a video editing chatbot. Like the number of platforms being thrown at us is basically constant. And some of them are very practical and useful. And I love talking to the folks who are doing that kind of stuff. Some of it is completely just off the wall, like customer success is a big industry. How and what do we sell into it? And I'm not saying that these tools are all necessarily a waste or that none of them are good, but it shows a startling lack of focus in what customer success is meant to do and is really a stark illustration of how easy it is to overcomplicate a customer success team and workflow. And I'm just thinking about like the different note-taking platforms out there, the different places where you can put support information, the different places you can actually have your team communicate. You got Zoom versus Teams, you got Slack versus Teams, you've got all of these different competing platforms, and each of them is really only as good as your workflow is designed. And that includes any of these extra ones too, and basically everything in there. You need clean data, you need clear processes, and you need platforms that are used fully and correctly. Those three key things, that's basically it. And then if you want to add more after that, go nuts. But one of the problems that I see is you have platforms that are kind of half used and never cleaned up. Information isn't really in there effectively. And that leads to a massive amount of delay in every single step. We'll get more to that in a minute. Then one of the other issues is not enough trust. These are places where, say, for example, you are sending out communication to 100 customers. There are cases where every single message has to be reviewed by a manager. And sometimes that's justified, sure. But a lot of the time that can come up where it will slow down your replies, where instead of replying to 100 in a week, you get to 100 in 3 weeks, for example, just because there's only so much bandwidth for someone to review these. And the step of draft, send for review, receive, revise, and then send, that turns one step of just writing the email out into what, 4? And that is quadrupling the complexity of a single task. That already is a lot. Sending out 100 customized emails to 100 individual customers, that takes time. And that's one of those cases where you want to remove barriers to make sure that kind of stuff is done in a timely manner. Because what happens all too often is you'll have this initiative of like, we have this sale, go ahead and reach out to your customers. Or we have this bug we just solved, go ahead and reach out to your customers. And if it takes too long to do each outreach, then you are actively doing the one outreach when the next one comes up. So you want to make that as clean and efficient as possible so that that communication goes out as uniformly as possible to all of your customers. No one's getting left behind. And so things aren't just jammed together. So you don't suddenly end up with an email covering like 9 different topics. Inefficiency. And here we talk about like turnaround time, right? So if you have a question and you reach out to your tech team to try to get an answer, if you get an answer same day, it's good. If you get an answer within like an hour, that's amazing. If you get an answer within a week, that's bad, because that means that every single conversation and follow-up waiting on that answer has to wait that week. And then depending on the answer, you have to do further delay as you either clarify or figure out how to act on that, figure out how to strategically approach that. There's so many different things waiting on small pieces that you want to have as few delays as possible. This inefficiency comes up a lot. The number one form of inefficiency I've seen in every single customer success department everywhere is messy data. Messy sales data, messy account data, messy contact information data. If your data is a mess, taking time to tease apart the pieces slows down everything related to it. One of the best workflows I ever saw actually drove me nuts at the time, but my entire office shut down for a week or 2 weeks here and there so that every single person on the team could focus on taking this specific data platform, following a clear set of instructions, and cleaning up, transferring, or reviewing data in it to make sure that the data was clean. It seems crazy to take your entire company to do that, and this was a small startup, so entire company was a small group, but that was massive. So we could have gone the slow route of having a couple people assigned to this and that be their specific role. They would not have had the expertise or breadth of knowledge to do it as well as the whole team did, and they certainly wouldn't have had the efficiency to do it all at once. And so you've had that lingering platform transition where you have 2 platforms where both being used sort of at the same time for months on end. That's bad. So take the week off, sit down and focus on it, clean up that data, and your future selves will appreciate it dramatically down the road. Next up, we've got a lack of clarity. And this is where you don't know how to start a process. You don't know how to approach something. You're assigned to a thing and you look at it and it sits there because you don't know what to do with it. That's something to absolutely avoid. And that applies to all kinds of things. Who do I talk to? What approval do I need? What steps do I take? What is on me versus on someone else? What even is this? All of these are situations where even one task that lingers like that causes a pretty dramatic logjam, because every time the person looks at it, they have to kind of reset, reassess, figure out what's going on, and then go back to the other stuff, and then they'll keep coming back to the thing they don't understand throughout the day. When the whole goal of this is in whack-a-mole, you whack those moles, right? You don't have that mole lingering out there taunting you. You get through those and you keep going on to the next one. And then, of course, inflexibility is also a challenge too. I just talked about that workflow of cleaning up data, about being willing to shut things down and take an approach like this needs to get done, let's do it. A lot of the time, processes are set in stone, they're set in a very specific way, and there's very little ability for folks involved in these to suggest changes or proactively kind of improve them. And you want a fluid, flexible team that's having basically a running conversation about what issues are, how they can be improved, and where the most need is. Flexibility is key for any of these teams, especially again because customer success is that central hub that directs traffic through the customer in every single department in the company. And if any part of that is rigid or inflexible, that's another logjam where you get things stuck, where you are leaning on outdated processes or inefficient processes and can't get past that or fix it because there's no room to change. Obviously, you don't want to change too much too quickly, but you do want to be open to the idea of change in a really meaningful way. Now, I wanted to go ahead and run through this in an actual example call I had not too long ago. So first things first, the customer reached out to me by name. This was to me directly. They reached out to me, to my direct contact, and asked for me by name. That's already a huge win because the customer knew where to reach me, how to reach me, multiple avenues to get to me, because after I didn't reply within a very short time window, which they also had an expectation of my kind of response time. They did the email. I didn't make the window, so they automatically just went to my Calendly and booked a meeting with me for the next day. Huge win. So they know who to talk to, where to get me, and then multiple ways. So if their initial outreach falls through, there's another way to get me. That could have been a text message. It could have been a live call. But depending on the urgency and complexity of the issue, the person reaching out knew exactly how to approach it. Set up a meeting for later. Text right now to make sure this gets quick help, or email and then wait for the turnaround time. Next up, I understood the issue. It was a hardware malfunction, and this is something we talked about before. So I knew the history of the conversation. I was in on the support conversation. So I was very familiar with what was going on, and the response that I received, or the question I received, was more of a, we've got the answer from your support team. How do we approach this? So I was the strategic person brought in to address the answer already given by support. That was hugely helpful for me to have support look at that and be able to give me the information I needed to give correct advice, and hugely important to the customer because they had better responses and information from me, but also they had that support chat to work with to go ahead and try some different avenues of a solution. And then I had the product knowledge to not only talk through the solution they'd been given, but also propose an alternative solution that I think was a better choice. I knew the product well enough, I knew the goal well enough, I knew this specific customer well enough that I could suggest another way to approach this, and an alternative that turned out to be the better choice. Then there were a few outstanding questions after that that were tacked onto the base conversation that I didn't know the answers to. I immediately knew who to talk to get answers to those questions in a timely manner. And then in there, I offered next steps. I said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and reach out to this team member, and I'm going to go ahead and get you a response within this time. And I will have some additional feedback on some of your other questions as well. So clear feedback, clear timeline. I knew what was going to happen, and so I was comfortable making those promises and was able to keep those promises to the customer because of there was such a clear kind of flow there. And again, had the alternative solutions tailored to the problem, and I had all of the conversations with product, sales, and support queued up. I was able to reach all three of those individual teams. They were able to reach me, and we were all able to see the parts of the conversation to understand the full picture of this specific issue for this specific customer. That coordination is huge, and that could have broken down any number of places, but that it worked out was amazing. Then I had the follow-up. I knew exactly which programs, note the plural, to put my conversation notes in. And this led to a renewal and an actual product upsell and an expansion. So this is one single call and one single issue with a bit of a running conversation. But even just running through these bullet points, you can get a sense of how many different moving parts there are here and how complex even a simple conversation can be, which goes back to our core point. That is why you want to make sure that this is all kept simple. All of these steps, all of this workflow, you want to make sure that it is clear, simple steps and that the process works. Now, where could this call have gone wrong? I touched on this a little bit going through it the first time, but let's take another look at that. So say the customer didn't know where to look out for help. Anybody in customer success has seen this where somebody goes to support and says, hey, I don't know who to ask this, or I forgot the name of my contact person, or I lost their contact information. All of those are varying degrees of bad, but the first case where the customer knows exactly who and where to reach out to, that's your dream case. That's what you want every time. This is just all the different shades of not what you want. And then phone or chat doesn't work. Say the customer reaches out to a defunct email address, for example, or a defunct chat bot and says, hey, I don't know who to reach out to help, and they get an error. That's immediately a problem, and that will destroy a healthy relationship instantly if something like that happens. Then say the respondent, say that's me or support, doesn't know the product. They're not able to answer the questions. They don't even know. They fumble completely and are not able to answer any part of the conversation. The more complex your products are, the broader your teams are, the less trained your teams are, the more likely that part is going to happen. But that's another delay. Questions have to get forwarded on, responses have to get forwarded on. The customer has to answer the same questions multiple times. That's not good. So there's that customer has to recap the issue, and then the customer has to restate the strategic goal or what they're looking to fix outside of just the specific error they're encountering. And then the respondent, say me, doesn't know where to get answers. So again, that unclear workflow of like, I don't know the answer to this question and I don't know where to get it. That gives you a question mark timeline as well. At that point, you can't give your next steps. You can't say, I will do this within this time frame, or this is going to happen, or I will reach out in this way and let you know when, because you don't know. You have to say, I'll look into it and leave it there. That level of ambiguity is sometimes fine, but you want to make that as minimal as possible to make sure you can say, hey, I'm going to reach out to this person. They typically reply within X time frame. Let's see, I'll get you the answer at the end of the week. Something like that. Some clear timeline is a huge help to building trust and making sure this stuff follows through. Restate the failed solution. So I started this conversation knowing that support had gone through some triaging steps to try to resolve the issue. And those would be our default triaging steps for their specific issue that I would always suggest that they reach out to support about. Now, I already knew that they'd already gone through support and seen the conversation and why that wasn't going to work. Had I not Had I opened the conversation saying like, hey, this is what we do in this case, either forgotten or not known the history of the conversation, that would immediately have soured the conversation as well. Other teams not notified. Say, for example, there is a product conversation or there is a sales conversation. If our communication is murky enough that we're not able to reach them and other teams don't know about this conversation, they could then call these folks as a reference and have this be the experience fresh on the mind of this customer when we send other customers to them. You don't want that either. And then we've got the no follow-up, no notes, if you don't know where to put the notes or people don't take notes. And then you've got a churn, likely churn. And then you've got a public detractor. Not only have you lost an advocate, but you've gained a negative. So not only will they not be an advocate, they will actually actively decrease your public image outside. So I wanted to go through kind of the steps here, all the really good stuff that went into this call, how well organized this was, how smooth the process was. This was a dream compared to every single possible place where this could break. And every single one of these sort of breakpoints is one of the reasons why your overall processes, your data, your workflow should all be as simple as possible. You want to keep the day-to-day, the individual to-dos as basic and simple as possible to avoid anything that gets in the way of building that trust, building that relationship, and having these conversations in a timely manner. Because any delay in these conversations leads to a massive buildup in logjam in your email, which leads to more unhappy customers, which then also leads to a lot of burnout and a tarnished company reputation. So how do you fix it? So here are a couple kind of basic examples of how to approach this. Obviously, this is going to vary team to team. So just to read this, the top goal is to do good business. Consistent product development, keep ahead of R&D, make sure the CSM workflow is driving everything forward and not gumming everything up. That's an important point to lay out too, because if you look at it, customer success is an incredibly powerful department and a really cool way to do business. But run badly, it does more harm than good. You want a smooth, well-running customer success team. You don't want a bad one. So a bad customer success team or a poorly run customer success team is actually worse than none in some ways, because you have more people losing threads in the conversation, more people getting FaceTime and unable to properly manage it. So that is where the dominoes start to fall, is any single logjam in any part of this process causes big problems because they all get, what's the word, magnified. So when you're reviewing this, if you're looking at your current setup, either testing it or trying to get feedback from your current customer success team, or you're just running through example scenarios with a upcoming team, or you're designing this and trying to stress test your stuff before anyone even gets eyes on it, this could be process by process or team by team, or even collaborative internal team by collaborative internal team. Proud of that. I said that both times right. So take, for example, what is the slowest point? Where's the delay? Where do things get stuck? How can we improve that? How do we make it faster? Then you've got which tools are really necessary. And this one I come to a lot because I'm seeing a lot of teams have both Salesforce and Gainsight. And in my personal experience, that's double work. They both do some things a little bit differently, but at the core of it, they both are, they're CRMs. They're areas where you keep track of your relationship with your customer. You pull on them for reporting data. They both talk to other platforms from other teams, like I think Copper from sales is the one I'm most familiar with. Do you need both? Do you really need both? Can you do your customer success workflow with just Salesforce or with just Gainsight? Or can you do it with another tool that fills in the gaps of the ones you don't need both? That's a really important conversation to have. Just because there's an industry standard, just because you have an existing relationship with multiple platforms, does not mean having these multiple platforms is the best choice. Another example that comes up a lot is Microsoft Suite. If you have Microsoft Suite, you tend to default to using Microsoft Suite for everything. So you get like OneNote, you get Excel, you get Outlook, you get Teams video chats. It's an expensive solution that the big advantage is it does a lot of these things, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't sub in something else for individual pieces. Personally, I get very frustrated by Outlook. I don't really love Teams. I think those are both inferior versions of their products, where in that space you can do something better. And the only ways that they work best, where their really strong advantages are if you use all of the Microsoft Suite along with them. That's a tangent, but that's exactly the kind of conversation and review you want to have when you're checking out the health of your customer success team. So, and then what processes be streamlined? An example here is, what are your key performance indicators? What are the key things you reach out on, the key things you track to get a sense of the performance of your customer success managers? And what kind of requirements do you have on them? So I think I've talked about this before. My favorite workflow ever was having a two-way conversation with every single customer every 60 days. That was the core goal. 30 is better, 90 is bad. If you're beyond 90, that's automatically high risk. But the goal was have some sort of conversation that makes sense for that customer every 60 to 90 days. Clean, basic, everyone was aware of it, easy to pull a report for that. That was phenomenal. Whereas a lot of them, it's you need a renewal conversation, you need a billing conversation, you need to have a quarterly business review, you need to have a strategic account meeting, and setting those like rigid specific meeting types over different parts of the year with a relationship with a client, it can be forced and it can not make sense for every customer every time. So you're stuck in this position either of customer success managers wrote following the exact process and meeting their key KPIs and kind of doing what they're supposed to do, or not following the process to do things in a way that makes sense for the customer, but in a way that doesn't necessarily feed to their KPIs. And both of those are bad. You want KPIs that don't get in the way of the workflow and a workflow that correctly feeds into the KPIs. You want those two to mesh cleanly. So that's a really good place to streamline. And here I mentioned that all hands reset, where you need to tuck into the system, get a bunch of eyes on it, make sure everyone knows what to do, and you clean everything up. If you have customer data that's not good, if you have a specific kind of glitch that's kind of persisted through the system and you want to go in and clean it up, having a bunch of people get in on this, say, hey, here's the login portal, here's what we need to do. You go through this list one at a time and clean these up. A fast turnaround this stuff is worth taking people off of their other stuff for a little while if you need to clean up something, especially like user data. I'm thinking, for example, of one tool I've got where there are, every time you log into a customer instance, there are two different instances. So instead of picking the named customer, I'm picking one of two, and it's always confusing which one is the correct one. It's usually the top one, but not always. Sometimes there are three, sometimes there are four. Something like that is messy data that's going to throw people off every single time they see it, every single time they get in there, and it's going to happen a lot. We're talking about, billing data, accounting data, what everyone is labeled as. Do they have their products correctly listed in your CRM? All of these things are things that automated reports, mass reporting, any kind of big outreach push, all of that relies on clean data being the basis for what you're doing forward. So it's worth it to take the break, shut everything down for a bit to clean up that data and make sure that it is good so that you can maintain it moving forward and make sure that every single thing that you're basing on it is correct. You don't want to be going in and being like, oops, we messed this up. Oops, this went to the wrong people. Oops, this tool didn't really work because it was pulling a field that we don't use anymore. It's really important to make sure you're reviewing this stuff periodically and taking the resources that you need to get the thing done correctly. That's why I put that in there. But of course, the overriding goal to all of this is to keep it simple. And this entire presentation and conversation is hilariously complicated, considering that my point is to keep it simple. But again, the overarching point, just to really hammer this home, is you want to make sure that your customer success teams are lean, efficient, functional, customer focused, have the ear and the interaction with the rest of the company, but are able to move things quickly so that nothing builds up, you don't get log jams, you build that trust, you build that future of the company, build that product growth in a way that is very alive and fluid, a way that works really, really well every single step of the way, which will build on a very solid foundation. If you have any bricks out of place, if you have any grading pieces that block this up, that has ripple effects that can cause significant damage in a lot of different ways. So review that process, review that training doc, review that guide, take the time you need to get it right, and overall, keep that sucker simple. Hopefully this has been helpful. I would love to go ahead and work with you and talk the details of your team. Reach out if you have any specific questions or if you want to see some more specific examples. Until then, till next time.